welcome to episode 87 of the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. I'm your host, Annabel Bateman, and you're with me today. We're going to talk about how I manage three kind of key areas of ongoing thyroid symptoms. I've got Hashimoto's, so particularly focusing on that in the long term, because often what happens is that even when we've been diagnosed and we're managing our thyroid health pretty well with maybe hormone replacement if we need it, thyroid hormone medication, or diet and lifestyle, or all of the above, like I've been doing now for a long time, often there's still symptoms that just don't really go away. So I wanted to talk with you about three of my, I don't know if they're top or bottom symptoms that I kind of have had to learn how to manage over time with varying ups and downs. And those three things are brain-related symptoms, so things like anxiety, brain fog, being easily irritated and upset, so those sort of brain mood category. The muscle weakness, muscle strength, sort of physical body category, and the weight category. So, that inability to lose weight, difficulty losing weight, I'm going to tackle that too. So this is an episode where I'm going to dive into my personal experience and some of the way I manage these things, things I've tried, things I've tried, things that have worked, even things that haven't worked, or worked at different points in time. So that is what we're going to cover today. Okay, before we dive into these three symptoms that I've just found that even when my thyroid health is good, I've still got to manage these symptoms. So I'm going to dive into those, but I want to do a bit of a blanket comment at the beginning, and that is these different symptoms can be symptoms, obviously, that your thyroid isn't working optimally. And so if you've been listening to this show for a while, you'll know that I advocate for regular testing and thorough thyroid testing so that you can keep a good check on how you're managing, your thyroid health. And when I'm talking about thyroid health in this context, I'm talking about what's happening with your TSH, your T4, your T3, your thyroid antibody levels. That's what you need to get tested on a pretty regular basis. Because, look, I don't know about you, but I would rather know after 3 or 4 months that things have kind of gone a bit askew rather than after 12 months. So that's why I like to get my levels tested every few months. But whether you know you've got a thyroid condition or not, these symptoms are symptoms or can be symptoms that you aren't in optimal thyroid hormone level. So please don't just put up with these symptoms because I'm saying I have to live with them even though I'm managing my thyroid health well. I've lived with Hashimoto's, well, really, I think since I was about 12 or 13, but I've been pretty actively managing it for at least the last 10 years. And the reality is that life goes up and down, and sometimes things are good, sometimes things aren't as good. And some of these symptoms are cues for me that I've learned over time, cues for me that things really aren't, they might have gone a bit askew. So whilst I know I'm talking a little in circles here, but I think it's an important distinction to make, is that these things can be cues that your thyroid levels aren't right and that you should go get tested. Even when things are optimal, you may still be living with some thyroid symptoms. So it's both. I think a lot in life, I know our world's become fairly divided down right, wrong, black, white, it's this or it's that. I kind of feel like in a lot of ways, and in this thyroid health space just as much, it can be a case of both and, not either or. Like it's a case of both. If you need thyroid medication, take thyroid medication and do the diet and lifestyle thing. It doesn't have to be either or. It's not, it's not so divided. There's lots of different things that we can do in combination. So I want to say that from the get-go, because just trying to manage the symptoms and not deal with the underlying problem of thyroid hormones or thyroid antibodies, and not trying to deal with, root causes and what got you into this thyroid condition in the first place, you can't just put a Band-Aid on symptoms and not deal with the underlying problems of getting your thyroid hormones level, reducing inflammation in your whole body and your whole system, improving your gut health, your liver health, all those sort of thyroid-friendly lifestyle things that I talk about. They don't just go out the window while we put a Band-Aid on a symptom. That's not what we're talking about here. I'm talking about managing the symptoms concurrently with working on your thyroid health and acknowledging that sometimes those thyroid symptoms don't completely resolve. They can improve, but sometimes, at least in my experience, and this is really what I'm talking about, is they haven't completely resolved all the time, forever, for everything. So, do you see what I'm trying to do here? I'm trying to hold it all in tension and in balance, because I think that is important. When I did this, talked about these thyroid symptoms I did a series a couple of years ago for Thyroid Awareness Month on these, what I kind of identified as 30 common Hashimoto symptoms, and each symptom I talked about each day or one a day, and how to manage them, but also understanding that you can't just manage symptoms. You have to manage your whole body and your whole approach to thyroid health. So, right. So if these things are big symptoms for you, they're not really resolving, maybe you haven't even had your thyroid tested or not for a long time, please do go, check in with that. Check in with your doctor or your naturopath or whoever's in your professional healthcare team, whilst hopefully some of these tips that I'm going to give you may be practically helpful alongside that. Right, all of that out of the way. The first category that we're going to deal with is brain-related symptoms. So this is things like anxiety, brain fog, it can be depression, just being easily irritable and, cranky. Things that would also fall into this brain category of symptoms would be oh, now I've got brain fog, see? I was going to say sleep, stress, that's all connected. I'm just going to pull out a couple because these are the couple of things that are probably more of an issue for me and how I manage them. So I'm just going to talk about them one at a time, and then I'm going to give you some practical tips of the things that I do that do help me to manage these things that have improved over time. So that sort of anxious feelings, anxiety is definitely something that I have had to learn how to manage at different points in time. And these things it does go in ebbs and flows for me. And I think I have identified that when my thyroid levels are out, I am more anxious. I'm more, that's when I get teary and I'm edgy. I'm easily upset. My startle reflexes, kind of heightened. Anyone can come up behind me and I'm like, jump out, that can be when I have trouble calming my brain down to go to sleep. Too many thoughts, lots and lots of tabs open in my brain, and I can just ruminate on things. So I have learned that it's worse for me when my thyroid levels aren't optimal, or aren't even good. But even when they are, I am a bit prone to that. I think I'm a bit of an overthinker. I like to be in control of things. So I think that's part of that type A kind of driven personality, what I probably call the thyroid personality. Some of it fits in this category. It's the, second guessing yourself, maybe sometimes a bit of insecurity. All of that kind of category all fits in. I think it's feeling edgy. Sometimes I just feel like I'm on edge. So they're not, that's not great to feel like that. Sometimes also into that category is brain fog. I've got to say I can lose words, definitely. I can lose train of thought. I can forget where I've put something down. Brain fog is a very common Hashimoto's symptom. Probably for me, the over worrying and thinking, the anxious thoughts probably is a little bit worse for me than the brain fog, but look at different points. Brain fog has been up there as well. I'm also aware that when it comes to brain related thyroid things. Nearly about 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with a demyelinating lesion in the brain, which is similar to MS, in that MS are demyelinating lesions, but I've only had one episode, and so that's why it's never progressed into MS, because it's multiple sclerosis, so multiple lesions. And the more I've dug into that and done lots of reading and research, I think it's probably related to inflammation in the brain. And obviously there's inflammation causes that demyelination, or it's one of, I should say it's the cause, but it's a contributing factor. And so I think, about that 9 years ago, it was just before I turned 40, or nearly 49. So yeah, actually it was just around Anzac Day, so end of April. That really heightened my awareness of, obviously, brain health. No one wants their brain health to decline, or their neurological health, or in this case, I didn't want to be able to, end up in a wheelchair. But they're all brain related. Like that's still, I put that in that brain related category. And the reason why I say that I think it's connected is that, well, in the end, they're all autoimmune. I mean, MS, Hashimoto's, both autoimmune conditions. Autoimmune conditions are connected to inflammation. I have been able to, I haven't progressed, that lesion hasn't progressed into anything else, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But I think that some of my approach to my life has probably helped with that as well. So I think I'm just, really aware of that brain connection. There is also a strong gut-brain connection. And so I think that's where that probably what really made me dig into it from that demyelination perspective. But even with, the anxious thoughts and feelings, the brain fog, inability to concentrate, the mood connection, just feeling edgy or teary or flat, there is a gut connection to that as well. And we know that gut health and leaky gut are really common in Hashimoto's. Definitely that's been a problem for me over the years. And so that is probably one of the key things, that if you, like me, kind of have some of these brain-related symptoms that just don't, fully resolve, they can improve but not fully resolve, then looking into your gut health is something that is definitely worth exploring. And so this is getting into some of the practical things, definitely some of the things I've done, as you know from listening to me over time. Food is a massive, it's not the only, and it's definitely not the only part, but it definitely has been a big part of my healing and thyroid management journey. And so I would say things like, if you've got that, if you are suffering from brain-related thyroid symptoms, you definitely want to look at things like gluten, grains, dairy and sugar. They're the most common inflammatory foods. Gluten actually can cross-react with cerebellum tissue. You can look into work from Dr. Karatsian about that. So, in fact, a lot of the gluten-related symptoms, if you have a gluten sensitivity, are actually not gut-related symptoms. They are actually brain symptoms. And last week's episode with Krista Bigler, she talked about that as well. So go back and listen to that one on food sensitivities if you haven't already. So you might not think you have an issue with gluten because you don't have any digestive discomfort or bloating or cramping or anything like that. But you might find that if you've got brain-related symptoms like brain fog, those sort of mood issues, that possibly could be connected to gluten. So definitely you want to look at that anti-inflammatory diet. And when you're taking those sorts of things out of your diet, you also want to make sure you're getting nutrient-rich food, so lots of good quality animal proteins and plant proteins and, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and a good variety so that your microbiome stays nice and diverse. Fermented foods, things like kimchi, sauerkraut, water kefir, kombucha, a little bit of those can be nice for the gut as well. And if you know you've got leaky gut, then maybe working on that with a naturopath or a nutritionist or your health provider so that you're healing your gut, and maybe you might need some supplements for that. or some herbs. I know one of my children is going through that at the moment, and he's on some good probiotics and a herbal mixture. And so it's not just about taking out the foods that could be a problem. It's also about healing that gut so that you've got better immune tolerance. And again, we talked about that with Krista Bigler last week. Making sure you're getting healthy fats, good omega, your good omega-3s, staying hydrated. That massive difference to your brain health is to stay really properly hydrated. Of course, drinking pure filtered water. So these are all things that I've done over time, definitely have helped. One of the most really helpful books I've read on the gut-brain connection, I'm sure I recommend this book all the time. It's called Grain Brain by Dr. David Perlmutter. He's a neurologist. I think it was coming up for an updated edition soon. I'm not sure about that. I haven't checked it. I read it probably about 9 or 10 years ago, maybe 8, around that brain time. Other thing that I do from time to time to help support that overall brain health and clarity and all of that is I do love to use my essential oils in this space. So some of essential oils that are beautiful for focus and concentration are things like rosemary. If you think about rosemary, it's like the symbol of remembrance. I always think that's a lovely connection. So rosemary, frankincense, eucalyptus, vetiver is a really lovely one for both calming down and focus. So it's very hard to focus if you're agitated and wound up. So some nice calming essential oils help you to focus because they help settle your brain so that you can focus. And vetiver, which is a grassroot oil, is a lovely one in that category. Other oils that can just help with calming, like just help calm your farm, just settle down, unwind, take a deep breath, which of course then helps our mental health as well. Are things like lavender, your citrus oils like wild orange or lemon, some of the tree oils. You think about big trees when you walk through a forest, it's nice and calming. So oils that come from big trees like spruce, black spruce, eucalyptus, cedar wood. So they are some lovely oils in this that can be used in this space. Clary sage is a great one. That's also really nice for thyroid support. Now, these oils you could use just in a diffuser next to your desk or in your bedroom or in your working, space. Sometimes if you're watching on YouTube, like this is just a roller essential oil blend, not specific for these, but you can just roll an essential oil down your forearm or on your temples, on your wrists, even just a drop in your hands, rub them together and have a nice big inhalation. That can be a really lovely way to use your essential oils in this way too. So if you're looking for clarity or focus, essential oils really lovely rubbed on your temple, behind the base of your neck, the top of your spine. That's a really lovely space to use essential oils in this sort of brain health, brain supporting space as well. The other thing I do often is to put a drop of frankincense essential oil on the roof of my mouth, which you think about the roof of your mouth is pretty much right underneath where your brain sits. And we know that frankincense can cross the blood-brain barrier. And essential oils generally are lipid soluble, so they do cross over our cell membranes and get into our cells. And, it's just so that's sort of utilizing the internal use of essential oils. But when we breathe them in, that's connected in with our olfactory system. So all of that to say, essential oils are a really nice, gentle tool to use in this, calming your brain down space, if that's an ongoing issue for you. I think the other thing really to say in this space is if you are, if some of that mental anxiety, worry, overthinking, overstimulation comes from just being too busy and stressed, then we need to take a look at that. Like we can't just cut the food out, inhale an essential oil and get on with our hectic life, or, poor boundaries, or running around like a mad, crazy person, trying to do everything for everyone. That's not going to ultimately help your stress levels and your thyroid health, and certainly not your brain and mental health. So I do talk about this a fair bit in my book, actually, but I think it is important that we learn to set boundaries and we ask ourselves, is there something that we can cut out of your weekly schedule that would allow you a bit more space to breathe? What would it take to live unhurried? I love that word, unhurried. I see a lot of Facebook posts or social media posts of friends and people I know that are just living very, very hectic lives. And, there are definitely different hectic stages of life, and absolutely some of those things are out of our control. When we've got lots of kids and they're little and you got to run around after them all the time, that is just a busy stage of life. But I do think it's important that when we have an autoimmune disease that we learn to really pare things back so that we allow ourselves time to heal and breathe and reduce that stress, reduce that mental load, and give our bodies the best chance of really healing. And I've been thinking a bit lately, like busyness is not a virtue. Okay, busyness is not a badge of honor. It's not something that is really something we should be bragging about, I don't think. I really don't think that is very helpful. It's in the stillness and the quietness and the unhurriedness that's when our bodies can really take stock and rest and digest and rest and heal. And this is a message to me just as much as to everyone. But I really feel like I have over time made a number of changes in my life so that my day-to-day life is less busy. I think working from home by myself and for myself definitely is part of that. But also not overscheduling my kids. And now they're bigger, that's made a difference as well. I don't think I'm not super, super busy, and that works well for me. But it's taken me a long time to get to that point. Anyhow, that is the brain-related episode, brain-related topic. I have done an episode way back in episode 16, all about thyroid and brain health with Dr. Philippe Duyon, who is a neurologist in the States. So that might be worth going back and checking out that one. That's back almost into the archives, isn't it? Episode 16. And so that is definitely one that would be worth having a look at. Okay, the second category I want to address of symptoms falls into sort of, aches, pains, and muscles, sort of our body, the physical body symptoms. And this is something that I definitely have to manage on a regular basis. It definitely gets worse when things aren't right, but even when things are good, I do need to be careful with my physical body because I do suffer from muscle weakness and various aches and pains and inflammation. And so, this is one that really does impact me on a pretty regular basis, like probably daily. And so I found ways of managing various aspects and improving my body strength and health. But this is definitely an ongoing issue, and that has plagued different parts of my body over time as well. So I'm going to actually start with, they are different symptoms. So I'm going to start with a muscle weakness, which is a different symptom to aches and pains. But muscle weakness is, in the end, that was the symptom that probably was the real clincher to prompt me to get my Hashimoto's diagnosis. So when I was 22 was when I was diagnosed. You've probably all heard this story, but I did get to the point where I couldn't hold my arms up to wash and blow dry my hair, which was long back then, not now. But just that fatigue in my arms, just I was like, oh, I can't hold this hairdryer up. I can't hold my arms up to wash and blow dry my hair. Now that kind of muscle fatigue or muscle weakness actually is a common Hashimoto's symptom. Obviously, back then, it was a severe symptom and my thyroid health was a complete diabolical mess. Basically, my thyroid wasn't functioning at all. So, it was a sign. It was definitely a sign that something needed fixing. And also still, and I don't know if it's because, I don't know why exactly, but still, when I know my thyroid levels are out of whack, I can be walking to the top of my stairs and my muscles feel fatigued. I'm not out of breath. I'm not exhausted. It's like I'm dragging my legs up the stairs. And so that I've learned for me that's a sign, something's not going right here with my thyroid levels. So just be aware that muscle fatigue, that tiredness of the muscle, even some, I'll come to the aches and pains separately, but that fatigue muscle is definitely a symptom. They can they can feel heavy and just that, just like the muscles themselves feel tired. Just know that we do need thyroid hormones to activate muscle fibers, and we need that active T3 thyroid hormone to be produced in our muscle tissues. So if your body isn't converting T4 to T3, that could be one of the reasons why you might have muscle weakness and tiredness. So that's where just a simple TSH test is not going to be enough. You need to get your T4 and T3 levels tested to see is my body getting enough T4, and B, is my body converting that into T3 adequately? Because if you don't have adequate T3, that's really the active thyroid hormone, then things like your muscles aren't going to function properly. So cramping and stiffness in muscles is also another sort of falls into this category, as are slow reflexes. So, when you kind of get the little hammer on your knee, if you've got slow reflexes, that can be a sign that of an underactive thyroid. But so if you know that your muscles are tired, they're cramping, they get stiff really easily, they're just fatigued, then hello, please definitely do get your thyroid levels tested. But I think what I've found out over time is that even when my thyroid levels, are good, I have to be careful with this muscle weakness, because I'm sure for me that's what has caused injury when I've perhaps pushed things a little bit too hard whilst I'm obviously not getting enough thyroid hormone into my muscles. And that's, I think when I've, had back spasms and, had shoulder injuries, and I think that's probably been an underlying cause. And so I've learned that, okay, if my muscles are really fatigued, then that's not the time to really push myself in the gym. Doesn't mean stop and lie around and do nothing, but that's probably not the time to try to, really push the extra heavy weights. Not right then. But it is important to do strength-based exercise. And I think that's what I've learned, particularly over the last 5 years or so, is to work on for that muscle fatigue and muscle weakness is I have to build muscle strength. And I have to build strength around those joints that end up sore. So for me, that is my shoulders. I mean, I've had lots of shoulder issues, feet issues, back issues. They're probably the main. Fortunately, I haven't had any knee issues, so that is great, because I do know knee issues are common with Hashimoto's. And I haven't had carpal tunnel in my wrists either, and that also is common. So, but I have shoulder, feet, back. Yep. Now, so what do I do about that? Like I said before, when I'm feeling good, I'm trying to really build on that muscle strength. I know you've heard me talk about Thyroid Strong program with Dr. Emily Kybird. I do have an affiliate program with Emily, and so if you sign up using my links to her Hashimoto's strength-based program, then I will receive some commission, which I appreciate. That helps fund the podcast. And I love her program. I've been doing it on and off at different times over the last probably couple of years now. But she's all about building strength. And strength, we tend to be a bit hypermobile often too. And so if we build the strength of our muscles so that that holds the joints together strongly, so then that will help prevent injury and those pains, in our joints. So definitely building on doing weights-based strength training has been really important for me. I do, when sort of falls into the aches and pains too, but I do use my essential oils a lot for my body as well. So oils like ginger, lemongrass, cypress, marjoram, they're really nice for massaging with a carrier oil into sore muscles. Wintergreen is another one that's great for that. And that some of those are anti-inflammatories. Turmeric would fall into that category as well. Obviously, eating an anti-inflammatory diet helps with inflammation. But in terms of muscle strength and circulation, getting blood flowing properly, also a problem with Hashimoto's is circulation. And so getting some of those warmer oils like ginger, wintergreen into your muscles will help the blood flow, and for me that really helps soothe them as well. When my body's not really been at its worst, then having regular magnesium flake baths has been really helpful, really soothing for a sore body. I think this is where working with whether it's aches and pains or muscle weaknesses, definitely working with someone like a chiropractor or a physiotherapist or an exercise physiologist to work out what are good strength-based exercises for your body and your individual weaknesses and weak spots and strengths, I think is really helpful. I've tried to do that over the years. My current chiropractor I'm finding excellent for doing that. He gives me exercises all the time. I've actually been diligent in doing them, and I'm feeling much stronger after my back spasm issue in August last year. I've been really careful. I get scared sometimes about taking on extra weight, but I've been doing a good job, I think, of building up my strength and not pushing it too far. So even this morning I was doing some weighted lunges, and I thought, oh no, I think I'm just going to stop. So I've learned to do that too. I could just feel the muscles working my back. And because we're about to go to Japan, I thought, oh, no, I don't want to push it right now. I want my back to be really good while we're in Japan. So that's muscle weakness. Falling into that, kind of very connected, is aches and pains. They're not exactly the same because aches and pains often happen in the joints, not always in the muscles themselves. But aches, pains, stiffness, cramps, weaknesses, all of those inflammatory symptoms, kind of makes sense because Hashimoto's is an inflammatory problem, right? It's autoimmune, it's inflammatory. So it's really common that we would have inflammatory issues with our body. Now, I don't know. I've had lots of aches and pains. I've had lots of I've had both shoulders have issues. I've had cortisone. I've had feet. I thought for a couple of years, my feet were terrible. I had cortisone injections into my feet. Ongoing back issues probably throughout my whole life. So I feel like at different points in time, I felt like a really old lady. And I think, oh my gosh, how is my body going to cope when I'm actually old? And quite seriously, I think, how am I going to walk around? How am I going to, bend down, get up, lift, all of those things. And this is where I think body strength, it's just, maybe because I am getting older, really aware just how critical that is to our overall health. And given that I have challenges because of the Hashimoto's in that space, I'm really taking increasing interest, I suppose, in maintaining protein levels, keeping my muscle strength good and improving, because I know that muscle strength declines with age. I'm being really deliberate in this part of my life. And at the moment, my body actually is feeling pretty good, which is great. So when it comes to those aches and pain, the aches and pains element, really that's where it is important to have an anti-inflammatory diet, really important. Often just removing typically inflammatory foods will remove joint and inflammation. Sometimes the nightshades, like if you have a particular issue with joint inflammation, then really do some digging into nightshades. So that's things like your tomatoes, capsicum, eggplant, chilies, because often they're a category of foods that can be problematic for joint inflammation. Obviously, they can not having enough thyroid hormone is really important. Not converting all the things I said before about not converting T4 into T3 is important. Your cells have to be actually getting the thyroid hormone to work and hold our bodies together and relax. And that ability for our muscles to relax is also really important. That's where the magnesium salt baths can come into play. So when it comes to those aches and pains from that systemic inflammation, diet really makes a big difference. Having good supplements really can help with that as well. So work with your health practitioner on if you've got any particular deficiencies, like magnesium often ties into this sort of body muscle category. Essential oils for aches and pains, probably similar to what I just said with the muscle weakness, but those nice warming essential oils, in particular applied topically. So with some carrier oil rubbed into whatever is sore, so to get those essential oils into that actual space. Again, doing the appropriate kind of exercise. So obviously I'm not I'm not a personal trainer, I'm not a physio or chiropractor. I have learned a lot from my own experience that I've definitely burnt myself out doing exercise. And so I think in general terms, when we talk about exercise for Hashimoto's, and you might want to go back to episode 59 with Emily Kybird on this topic, is it's really easy to burn yourself out by doing a lot of high intensity exercise. I've done all the Bikram yoga, the hot yoga, boxing, get all those kind of high intensity things. They're often going to create problems for those of us with Hashimoto's. But we can't just walk and do yoga and Pilates. We do need to be building our strength as well. So it's that, again, it's not either or, it's both and it's working out what works for you at this particular point in time, which might be different to 3 months ago or in 3 months' time. It's just keeping that regular check on your physical body. And, I've learned for me, and I think my chiropractor has been really helpful in this, in that if I kind of waited till nothing hurt, then I probably would do nothing. But there's a different hurt between an injured hurt and then just my normal level of hurt. And so I have learned I can do shoulder presses, even though my shoulder does hurt a bit, because not currently injured. That's just residual pain. So it's sort of, you've got to learn how to push yourself without injuring yourself, I guess is what I'm saying. And having a professional to work through that with is really important and helpful. The other thing I've done, I've got to say, for my feet, which I tend to have forgotten about because largely they're better, is I turned out I had, cutting a long story short, had arthritis in my feet. Like I said before, did have a cortisone injection into each foot. I had, what are those? They're like fluid lumps that you often get in your wrist, and you bang them with, the old tradition is you bang them with the Bible. I've lost mental block, I've lost the name. It's like a cyst. It's not a cyst though, it's called something else. A ganglion cyst. I had ganglion cysts in my feet as well. And I did have fluid sucked out of them. Again, a horrible process. So I've done those physical things with my feet probably about 5 or 6 years ago. But I've also seen an orthotist, someone who makes shoes, and not a podiatrist. Orthotics really did nothing for me, but getting what I call super shoes made for me really helps to take the movement out of my feet. They're like custom made rocker bottom shoes. So I'm lucky I live in a pretty casual kind of casual place in the world and a casual work at home environment. So I do wear kind of pretty casual shoes most of the time, and I can walk for long distances. I'm not getting pain in my feet when I get out of bed in the morning. And I'm not, look, if I've been out walking all day or on my feet all day, my feet ache, but not like they used to. So having those shoes made has made a incredible, massive difference to my feet. So just thought I'd throw that in because I do forget about that one now that it's largely resolved. So this whole weight category of symptoms, it's really one big symptom really, isn't it, is very common with Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism. It's not everybody with Hashimoto's has to have a problem with their weight. So if you're listening to this and you're still perhaps in that exploratory stage, maybe you do, or maybe you don't, you're getting some tests, but you don't have a weight issue, don't think that rules out Hashimoto's, because there's plenty of other symptoms you can have. And that's it's a great thing. If that's not a problem for you, fantastic. It doesn't mean you don't have a thyroid problem, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But for many of us, we do. Many of us, that is one of the biggest symptoms that we notice is unexplained weight gain, and then an almost impossibility to get it off. The impact of the thyroid on metabolism is pretty epic. It's pretty major. And so if your thyroid isn't working optimally, that's going to have a massive flow-on effect onto your metabolism. And, given that thyroid health can decline slowly and gradually over many years, you think about what that might do to your metabolism slowly declining over many years. And it can take a long time for that to improve. So even with thyroid medication, that's not the total solution, although it's going to be next to impossible to lose weight if your thyroid levels aren't optimal. That's just the reality of it. So this is definitely, if you're battling with weight, I have probably since I would say I was about 10 to 12, which maybe was when my thyroid really started, but I've always sort of said clearly around puberty. I've never been, let's just say I've never been thin. Maybe when I was 6. I don't have that build. I've never been small. I have definitely had periods of time where I've carried a lot of extra weight, and periods where I've carried less. This has been a major psychological, I guess, issue for me as well over a period of time, particularly as a teenager growing up, just thinking I was greedy, fat and lazy, couldn't lose weight, feeling quite unattractive. And I look back and I was pretty unattractive, in all honesty. So I think I was right to feel like that, because I was. It wasn't for the reasons that I thought it was, but I definitely wasn't looking like the picture of teenage health, that's for sure. And I definitely have spent decades dieting and worrying about my weight. So this is a precarious issue. And I know I've talked about this before. And I've done a lot of work, more recently around mindset, around body image, the way I look, my relationship with food and dieting and weight. And so that has helped a lot. And I think the brain lesion really helped, because that really made me realize, look, I just have to be healthy. I just have to not end up in a wheelchair. This is not about being skinny and fitting into a size 10 pair of jeans. This is about being healthy. And that was a really big wake-up call for me, and incredibly helpful in a mindset shift for how I see myself and my body and my relationship with food. But the reality is I still have excess weight. Like if I looked on any sort of recommended weight things, I am overweight. And so, and at different points in time, I've cared about that more than others. And even within that healthier mindset stage, I've cared more about it at different times than others. And I can kind of rein things in and let things go. But it's certainly something that's never not been there, I suppose, as a symptom. And yeah, so I want to tell you a couple of the key things that I think have been really important for me in helping me to manage weight. And for a long time, I've been very stable, probably higher stable than perhaps is optimal, but a generally healthy, stable level for a long time until about before Christmas. And I put on about 3, 4, 5 kilos over Christmas period. And it wasn't just to do with Christmas. My thyroid was out from the end of last year. So, and I'm working on just toning that back a bit. I don't have any unrealistic weight loss goals, but I am trying to lose at least 5 to 10 kilos would be my goal. So that I'm going to come to what I'm currently doing in a minute. But historically, what has definitely helped me lose weight and in a healthy way and really quite radically change my relationship with food and what I would call an addiction to food, an obsession with food, was changing my diet and giving up gluten. And hand on heart, I really believe that giving up gluten radically changed my relationship with food. And I'll tell you why. And I didn't know this at the time. It wasn't until about 6 months later when I read that Grain Brain book that I mentioned earlier. I realized then that about 6 months or so after I'd given up gluten, that I just wasn't looking for food as much. I didn't feel addicted to food. I didn't feel like food controlled me. And I've learnt in that book and subsequently that there is an addictive component to gluten, and it's also in dairy. It might be slightly different, but there are addictive components. And so I think once I completely cut it out, the actual addictive nature, the addictiveness, the thing that was physiologically addictive, went away. And sugar's the same. We know sugar's addictive, and even natural sugars are addictive. Maybe not to the same degree, I'm not sure from a scientific perspective, but sugar is addictive. We know that. It lights up all the pleasure centers in our brain like cocaine does. So, when we remove those addictive foods too, I think that really helps not feel controlled by food. So, again, that anti-inflammatory diet, I kind of live a paleo-ish diet that does remove those typically inflammatory foods. It helps heal the gut. And I think if your thyroid hormone levels are good and you're eating a good, clean, anti-inflammatory, nourishing diet, then that should help you lose weight as well. That definitely has worked for me in the past. What I've worked out recently, and it could be that perimenopausal stage, as I said, I'm nearly 49. It was definitely my thyroid levels were out towards the end of last year. And so I have been really cutting out the sugars, really. That's the bottom line. I think the biggest change I've made to my diet in the last month, and I've lost about 2.5, nearly 3, but 2.5 kilos in that month, has been really reducing the sugars and essentially quite low carb, not no carb, but low carb. And I think for me, some days it's been super easy and other days it's been hard. And like even yesterday, I had some hot chips, so it's definitely not no carb. But I do feel like my body, at least, this might be different to your body, but my body does better without the sugar. And the sugar in its broadest sense of even the things like dates and lots of fruit and maple syrup and all the kind of the healthier sugars that I've done lots of baking with and making treats with and snacking on. I think, if I'm honest, my body feels better without them, as much as my brain would still like to have them. And I'm not saying I won't. I'm definitely not never going to have those things, but they become fairly regular treats, I think, for me. And so just reining that back in and cutting those things out, because I've already eat, gluten, grain, dairy free. I think actually really honing in the sugars, and making sure I'm getting lots of good quality fats and protein and lots of vegetables, green leafy vegetables and variety of vegetables. And I've been having more kimchi, sauerkraut. That seems to be working for me at the moment. I haven't really changed my exercise at all, which is the strength-based training and a bit of Pilates and my walking. So I do think, what works for me might not work for you. That's all part of the thyroid-friendly journey that we get to go on. But I think they're the principles that, particularly the anti-inflammatory approach and managing stress. Stress makes you, harder to lose weight, holding on to toxins. There are toxins called obesogens that actually make you fat. So removing a lot of your toxic burden is also really important when it comes to losing weight. So, that's a whole nother conversation, which I won't have now, but definitely do that. I can tell you things that have not worked for me in losing weight. And the biggest one that I haven't talked about for a while, that I'm just going to, because we're talking about, this is my experience anyway, is taking weight loss medication. Now, there's the only weight loss medication I've taken is Duramine. And I'm not going to go down the Ozempic kind of, that kind of current, it's pretty popular conversation, which is a type 2 diabetes medication, is my understanding. I haven't tried that. I don't have an opinion on that because I don't know enough about it. The only weight loss medication I've tried is Duramine, and I see it come up in different forums. So I'm pretty passionate about sharing my experience on this, because essentially Duramine is speed. That's pretty much what it is, is speed. And yeah, I did lose a couple of kilos when I went on to Duramine, but it set my thyroid health back years. It took me nearly 5 years to recover, actually, from taking Duramine. I couldn't sleep. I was taking sleeping tablets to sleep. I was highly anxious. But the biggest thing is it just blew my thyroid out. I think I can't remember with the T4 and T3, but my TSH went from normal to like 70 or something crazy, like completely blew my thyroid health out. And so whilst I lost a couple of kilos in the time I was taking it, the consequences were so great, and it just took me so long to recover, that, yeah, I say be very wary. I think you've got to work on all the other things first. The good, clean diet, the reducing stress, reducing your toxic load, changing your mindset, but also not burying your head in the sand. Like, I think the reality is if we do have a weight issue, the reality is that it's not healthy. And so we do have to work on being healthy, but the focus being on being healthy and not just on being skinny for being skinny's sake. We want to be healthy so that our whole body has the best energy and a capacity to live our life and be of service to the people around us, and to pursue our passions and interests and relationships. And so we do want to have a healthy body. Gosh, it's such a complex topic, isn't it? So I think, we do have to look after our weight. It does come with significant extra challenges. There isn't a one size fits all. There's not even one diet that's going to work for everybody. As much as, I talk about the basics, there are definitely nuances. And even that paleo style, anti-inflammatory diet may not be right for you. There might be other styles of diet that or approach that is going to work better for you. But they're the general principles that seem to be at least a baseline to start with for most people when it comes to losing weight. And shifting that mindset into focusing on being healthy. And that can take, it's taken me years. And even then still I dip in and out of that sometimes. But I think that's the healthier approach. It's more long-term, it's more sustainable. And we do want to be healthy. We don't want to be walking around carrying lots and lots of extra weight. None of us want that. I really believe that, maybe I shouldn't say no one, but no one I talk to that I can think of really wants that. Sometimes we come to terms with that and we kind of settle. It's just, I don't know. I'm probably going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I do think, A, it's important to be healthy. B, I get really cranky when I hear, I don't know, health influencers and people say, oh, it's just calories in, calories out. Like, I don't know, if you've lived with Hashimoto's and a battle with weight, that just feels like a slap in the face. So I'm definitely not in that category. I absolutely don't. If you are struggling with weight, I can't say I feel your pain because we all are unique, but I do understand it's not an easy thing to live with. It is a really frustrating symptom of living with Hashimoto's, and we live with Hashimoto's forever. So we've got to work out how to really manage that well, or as well as we can, without getting all twisted up about it and adding ridiculous amounts of stress because we're trying to be kind of somehow perfect or follow things to the letter. That's counterproductive. That can make it all worse. It's sort of somehow just trying to live this thyroid-friendly lifestyle in a way that is going to lead to optimal health. And that is a life quest, I think. It certainly feels like mine. I'm definitely in this journey, which is kind of why I wanted to share. These are the three categories of, I guess, the longest term impact that I have experienced with Hashimoto's is kind of plays out in these things on a pretty regular, often daily basis. But there's definitely been improvement. So like I've made lots of changes to the way I approach my life and my mental health, I won't say mental health, my mindset is probably the word I was looking for in that context, and reducing toxins and doing, all those things. But it's taken me a long time to get to this point. And I hope over the many years to come, I think it'll be similar. There'll be ups, there'll be downs, there'll be some symptoms that flare up at different points in time, others that completely resolve. Like there's on that list of 30 common Hashimoto symptoms, I've had lots. I haven't had all of them. I've had a lot of them, and a lot of them have completely resolved. So things like hair loss. I don't have any hair loss anymore. I did for a long time. Sorry, I'm looking at my list in my book, but I'll post it in the show notes, the list. Puffy face. I don't have a puffy face at the moment. Sugar definitely gives me a puffy face. What about things like constipation? Like I haven't dealt with constipation for a long time. Hoarse voice. When I was first diagnosed, I had a hoarse voice. That's not an issue for me anymore. I don't remember having a goiter, but I did have a bit of a goiter. It shows up in past medical records, so I don't have that anymore. Infertility is not something that's a very common symptom. It's not something I didn't have trouble falling pregnant. So what about other things like enlarged tongue? My tongue's all right now. I have had scalloping at the edges, which is not uncommon. It's probably still there if I looked closely. Fluid retention. Generally, if I'm hydrated well, I don't have much fluid retention. Low motivation. I'm pretty motivated at the moment. Again, if my levels aren't great, that does impact my motivation. So non-restful sleep. Again, pretty much now. I nearly did sleep as a symptom in this, but I've talked a lot about that in other points. Low libido. I don't generally have a low libido anymore, so that's good. I've got to say, as a total aside, having your husband have a vasectomy, really good for healthy sexual life. But low libido definitely comes with low thyroid, but I don't have that at the moment. That is good. So I guess I want to say, whilst I've focused on 3 things that I do live with on a pretty regular basis, by absolutely no means, there's lots of thyroid symptoms that, I've had in the past that have completely resolved. So you will have probably a completely different set of things that you've had and have gone, or, maybe, I think this is what is unique to all of us. So there we go. That is my how I kind of navigate living with those Hashimoto symptoms. What I would like you to do now is we're going to dive into the KISS thyroid coaching segment so that you can work out of all of my ramblings of the last 45 minutes or so, what you're going to take away from this episode. So first and foremost is if you haven't had your thyroid levels tested for a while or at all, maybe if you haven't had them for at least within the last 6 months, then can I suggest that that's the very first thing that you do, is you go to your doctor, you get a full thyroid panel. So that's your TSH, T4, T3, thyroid globulin antibodies, and the thyroid peroxidase, so it's the TG and TPO antibodies tested, because otherwise we're just looking at Band-Aid solutions if we're not, if your thyroid levels aren't optimal. So if you haven't had your bloods tested for a while, please make that your first priority, is to do that. The second one is have a think about, think about the symptoms that you no longer have. So that might be a good thing to do. Have a look down the list. I'll pop it in the show notes of those 30 common symptoms. And no, there's heaps more, but these are just common ones. Think, oh yeah, I'm not dealing with that anymore. Or, oh yeah, I've forgotten about that. Because I think that it makes you realize how far you've come in that improvement in your thyroid health. Is things often happen gradually. You don't always pay super close attention to what you're not dealing with anymore. But I think that's probably really helpful to think, oh yeah, that's good. Oh, that's not a problem for me right now. Let's add that in as a tick. So do that for a bit of good positivity. And the third question would be, are there any symptoms that if your thyroid health is good, are there other symptoms that you're just managing on that day-to-day basis? And is there anything from what I've said in my experience that perhaps you haven't tried that you could try, or maybe go do some research into some of the things that I've talked about. But whatever that if it's a symptom or something you want to go and explore, just jot that down in your. I hope you've got a little thyroid notebook so you can jot that down. It's just a takeaway that you can think of that you can then go away and apply to hopefully see some improvements in your thyroid health and your body, so that you can get on and be that fabulous person that you are, and enjoying each day of your life and offering all your gifts, talents and skills to the people around you. Have a fabulous fortnight, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid, and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful, because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button or a bell, or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.